Okay, on the beach. Let's begin. This is where we ended up last time. I have brushed the sand, I've brushed the salt off. You can see that this is pretty wavy. For this session, we're going to paint the shell. And then we will decide just what we're gonna do with all of this once the shell is painted. For this session, I'd like to talk about a couple of brushes. This is the flat brush. This too is a flat brush. So I just want you to know that these are craft brushes. Probably came in the same pack for something very economical for price. This one is soft, it's flat. It will allow for me to make these lines in the shell. This one feels a little more like a scrubber. It's just thicker. And so it does allow for scrubbing should I need to scrub off or lift off. I prefer to use the word lift off a color rather than scrub. There is a time to scrub, but it's toward the end of a painting because it will mar the surface of the paper. So you want to be really careful about when you scrub. The other brush I'd like to use, of course, is a Aqua Elite brush from Princeton. It holds a very nice point. And of course, the larger Aqua Elite. So this one is a 4 and here is an 8. I'm going to mix up my colors for the shell. For the most part, I'm going to be using an cobalt blue. So pretty much straight up cobalt blue. And I can see it's a little dirty, isn't it? So it really does look more like ultramarine blue, and I'm okay with that. If I want to lighten it up just a little bit, I can add a little bit of Prussian. Let's just see. Yeah, I like that Prussian. So here we go. We've got our colors mixed up. Prussian blue right here, which is very beautiful because it's got a little green in it, and you can move it toward a turquoise very nicely. And then of course we have the cobalt blue. So let's begin with the painting process. I'm going to just get started with the line work. Actually, I'm going to get started with some value. So here we go. Some value. This is the cobalt. Actually, I really like the Prussian. Isn't that pretty? That is pretty. Yes, that's exciting. And you know, you really do want your paint colors to be exciting. You can see the waves of the paper. The next time you see this painting, I will have flattened it. Oh, that's pretty. Yes, Prussian blue. I'm so glad I gave it a try. Really, what you could do is paint the whole shell a Prussian blue. Certainly as we move inward on the shell, we're going lighter and lighter. I had already put a wash of cobalt down. Remember that the watercolor pigments will dry 20% lighter than what you see on the paper. So this is the first step, just to kind of check those values. And yes, it's definitely Prussian. I'm so happy I tried it. So because this is going to be wet again, I don't know how much will get done as far as some of the details. So we may just start to work into some of the background. But one thing at a time. This shell is certainly a work of art, isn't it? And you know, you can get dizzy on some of these spirals, which I just did. I got a little too dark where I was supposed to be a little bit light. So I am adding water. Water is my eraser. I'm gonna leave that little button right there that protrudes the most. I'm going to leave it white, just so I can be sure that it does pop forward. I'm going to lift up some of these puddles. I'm very thankful for some of the pencil marks that were made during the transfer process. This Prussian blue just really makes the shell exciting. If I decide that it's just too blue, we can always add the cobalt or the aquamarine just to neutralize the brightness of it. What's wonderful right now is that the paper is wet, it is saturated, which allows for these very soft transitions. So it worked out all right, didn't it? So there's a little wax over there. And this is where the sand bled into the shell. So what I'm doing is I'm lifting here's the flat. It just has a little stronger bristle. And we'll see if we got some of that up. You know, it's hard going into a painting. You go in cold and you have these ideas and then you change your mind as you go. So you can see I've done a bit of that today, and I don't let it upset me. I'm not letting this upset me either. Because you know I can take a Mr. Clean eraser and I can get that up. So that's very staining and I'm not gonna worry about it. But I will tell you that the shell connects to the background over here with a very soft edge. This is your hard edge over here. This edge right through here is rather soft. It's not lost, it's soft. So I'm just looking to see if I have a Mr. Clean handy. I don't see one, so we'll save it for the next time in. Okay, back to the Prussian. Note the angles as well. All right, the other thing I'm gonna do is just lighten up over here. Here's another flat that just can kind of pick up and lighten some of those. Okay, so we've done a bit on the shell. I think what I'd like to do now is just shore up some of the sky color which can be darkened for more drama. So everyone, if you ever were told that watercolor is unforgiving, you can see that it's not. It is not unforgiving. I'm going to work this until I get what I want. All right, I'm going to use that Prussian blue because I think it's so pretty and it will tie into the shell. I'm using a round brush. This is a Scepter Gold, Winsor Newton Scepter Gold. I like the way these blue colors in the sky kind of go around the shell. I think that's just really pretty. And we're going to let them just meet there in the middle. I'm going to go back to some of that magenta. I'm going to mix it with the blue. Oh, I like that color. It's a beautiful violet. And again, I'm just going to go up here and touch the shell. And I'm going to do the same thing right here. And then you know what? I think I am going to need to stop because everything is just really wet. We can see if it will take any of the cobalt blue for the details, which is just taking our time and figuring out the markings on the shell. Yeah, it's too wet. If it were damp paper, I think we would be in good shape. So we're just gonna let this stop right here for the moment. I think, but let me see if I can make any headway over here. Notice how I'm twisting and turning the brush because I want to be mindful for the marks that the brush is making on the paper. As long as what I'm doing is working, I'll keep going. I like to build the watercolors slowly because it really does allow for me to problem solve as I go. So I will quit before I'm really lost. And then when I go back in, I usually know a little more about where I need to go. The painting will teach us something new very often. very often it will also stretch us into learning something new. The time we learn the most is after we're pushing past the halfway point. So we can see some variations in there. That's really pretty. And I'm enjoying this brush and the marks. They start to soften and spread out. Okay, I just happened to see this. I'm gonna lift that up. So not only am I able to get the flat marks from the top, but I'm also able to do something like this, which is like a sketching. So a flat brush can be really useful. I'm enjoying the very damp paper. I am enjoying that. And this is cobalt blue. So you can see how this brush is really working for me. I think very often we get used to a certain brush, and before we realize it's the only brush we're using. I'm speaking just as much to myself as I am out to anyone else listening. So I'm starting to find my way around this shell. It's an amazing shell. I was able to do some research. And you know, if you know for sure what this shell is, I would love to know. My research says that there is such a thing as a blue conch. There's also such a thing as a Cowie, that's Cowie, which I think is what this is. Just my best guess, everyone. If there's a better choice for what this shell is, please add it to the comments below. But this could also be a turbo shell. If you look at the markings of the Cowie shell, you'll see that they come in these marvelous green shades, but they also come in the blues. So, you know, if we're gonna paint this shell, we need to do it justice, because it's a magnificent shell. So now I am kind of sketching with a brush. I want to be sure my directional marks are going the right way. And there's a lot of them, so I can put those in, knowing I'll come back and put even more in. That is really pretty. So I was using the tip, quickly putting those in, and using the flat. See how I turned that? I just moved the watercolor. I'm also dragging it right out from some of these darker hues. If you have good paints, you can drag them around at this point with the surface of the paper being damp. When I come back in, I will be adding some warmer colors, some taupes, some yellow ochres. Right about in here. The paper is still pretty wet. Oh yeah, it's wet. Just checking on the directional lines. Still pretty wet back there. You're gonna see how the Mr. Clean Eraser will pick all this up and give me back a very pale value. So you can see there's a lot to do in the way of creating this shell. And you just have to stay with it. I'm going to pick that up. All right, well, I didn't get as much done on the shell as I wanted to. My paper is still wet. What I'm going to do is just mix a little of this cobalt with some burnt sienna and add in some shadows. And the same over here. I think I'll wait for this to dry. And we're going to call it finished for today.